I personally know designers. They charge way more than you would normally assume, like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Most people are ghosts on the internet. They just have no presence, no work, nothing. Not to say that you cannot make money as a thumbnail designer, as social media, covers, logos, branding. But then
in the next 20 minutes, you're going to learn everything that you need to know about design. With me today, I have Abhinav, who has been running 10K Designers community and has helped hundreds and even thousands of designers start their career. So let's talk about design with Abhinav. Abhinav, how are you doing there?
Doing awesome, bro. Glad to be on your channel, Ishan. Been watching for a while. Finally glad to be here.
Absolutely. I've been consuming your content on Twitter as well for a long time. Finally, we got to do this. How are you doing there? And tell me a bit about your journey of how did you start with design?
Doing amazing, bro. I actually got my start in Bangalore. Right now, I'm based in Copenhagen, running 10K Designers. But I got my start in Bangalore and, grew up in Bangalore. I was, in third standard when my family moved to Bangalore. And I got to really see the whole startup curve. But interestingly, the way it happened for me was when I was in college, in Manipal, doing CS, I realized that, okay, this is not kind of working out. I don't really want to sit for placements, all of this. And just around that time is when the iPhone had come out. And so with the iPhone, of course, too poor to actually afford it, I had an Android. But seeing the app stores, seeing the designs of iOS apps back in the day, I was really blown away. I was like, dude, is this a job? Can I just do this? And it wasn't clear back then. You had to be a developer. I think UI, UX design as a role, especially for mobile products, only happened in the last decade. So that's how I kind of got my start. Did a lot of freelance projects, most international, because I guess in India, people weren't really developing iOS apps back then. Did a bunch of projects. This was Upwork, online, little bit of personal brand, that kind of stuff. And then somehow, after college, I found myself back in Bangalore. But what was different this time was the startup boom had happened, right? So Flipkart, Swiggy, all kind of started around that same time. And so I found myself in a very just lucky position where I'm like, okay, I have all my experience in designing iOS. Of course, from college, I was doing posters, fest work. But then being in the startup scene, my first kind of official job after freelancing and everything was at housing.com. So moved to Bombay for a short while before coming back to Bangalore, and then, Unacademy, head of design. But that's how I got my start. Had a lot of course, tailwinds helping me. But yeah, that's the scene.
Very interesting. And what tips would you have for someone who is just getting started in the design field? What steps can they take so that they can have a great experience as a designer and find opportunities at the same time? How can they get ahead of the majority of designers, if I have to rephrase that question?
Yeah. I would say in 2023 now, I would say one of the biggest strengths for designers is being able to focus, because it's never been a better time to be a designer, right? At this moment, for anybody who's pursuing creative fields, there's so much you can do. You would get into 3D, you would get into graphics, you would get into illustrations, product work, motion, the whole NFT movement kind of happened, AI art. Now we've got Spatial coming up as well. So that is a very overwhelming position to be in. It's yeah, of course I want to do everything. This looks really fun. I want to make really cool stuff on the internet. But then I can't really pick, how do I start? And I think that's the biggest one. You need to start with one thing before you expand to others. Yes, we want to learn Figma, Framer, Webflow, Blender, every single tool. But I would say starting out, that focus is needed. So starting with that, I would say the next immediate thing for designers to stand out would be a little outcome focused. I think most of the people who want to get started are only stuck at the level of let's learn the skills. But there is a level beyond that. You and I know that learning the skills is only the initial thing to actually doing projects that make money with the skill. And I think most people kind of stay here because there's always something new to learn. You can always justify it to yourself, yeah, I'm learning, I'm doing this. But bhai, at some point, you got to be like, okay, this is enough. Let me just start making money now. So the second tip that I have is figure out how you can do projects, right? I know you want to practice as a designer. You want to do a lot of stuff by yourself. But a lot of client projects, a lot of freelance projects, you're getting paid to actually practice, to actually apply your skills. And this becomes a case study in your portfolio. And that is almost like a rolling snowball effect. right? One project leads to a slightly bigger project. And, having run an agency, you know how that goes, right? As referrals pick up, word of mouth picks up, your own confidence goes up. So that would be my suggestion.
Very interesting. So let's talk about AI, right? How can designers use AI to level up in their work? Because we've seen too many memes of how AI is going to kill your jobs. I want to hear the other perspective of you as you've been working in the design field. What do you think is the most efficient way, and what are some tools that you would recommend designers to dig deep into and understand how they work to streamline their workflow and get more productive?
So the mindset that I think is a very useful one when thinking about AI as a creative person, as a designer, is you want to use it to increase your floor, but also your ceiling. Now, what do I mean by that? For people starting out, you want to be above floor. So for example, if your work is really bad, you only have, you can make some stuff, but you clearly know it's not good. You know that if a client saw this, they're probably not going to want to hire you. All these are signals that you're kind of below floor, right? There is a certain level you need to be above to kind of pass off as a designer, to even start applying, to even have internal confidence. And I think AI can really help you here, because the main reasons people get stuck is just because uncertainty or just lack of clarity. It's just so many new terms. It's just so confusing. And so raising your floor, tools like ChatGPT, really good for this, right? You can actually have a conversation with ChatGPT, say, hey, I'm a student. I'm trying to learn UI UX design. This is what I know. Is it okay if I use you as a mentor to ask you questions? Right? Just set this context up. You will have this in your ChatGPT sidebar. And you can always come back here and say, hey, I'm facing a situation where this thing, and then how do I do this? So this really helps you cross this floor barrier. Most people, they wait for answers. They're like, okay, eventually, like a year later, people find out, oh, okay, that's how proposals work in freelancing. Versus the really motivated folks can just go through that floor very quick. So that's one thing. Outside of that, it can also raise your ceiling. So for example, if you're a designer who's not so good at, let's say, digital illustrations, digital art, but you still want to use this in your web pages or your websites or something like that, or in your thumbnails. Now, of course, you could learn the skills, go deep into that. But today you can use something like Midjourney or some of the other alternatives available to now, just without any effort, just a little bit of tinkering, you now have a new skill that you've added on. So now this kind of increases your ceiling because a lot more new stuff is possible. So that would be my suggestion. In terms of tools, I think we're moving super fast. So I don't want to pin down anything. But in general, I would say keep an eye on ChatGPT, right? That is probably here to stay. That's probably after Figma, very likely that becomes your most used tool, especially given the trajectory we've seen this year. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, look into generative tools. So things like generating videos, generating images. A lot of these tools, I think we're still to see a lot of breakout tools here. There's a few, but these will really grow in this year. So you kind of want to be aware, you want to kind of be playing around with this, because you never know, one new tool drops and suddenly your ceiling of what's possible just goes up. You can just do a lot more.
Yeah, it's crazy how there are tools that can literally take a drawing and turn it into a complete Figma, file that you can then use and give it to a developer. Very interesting what is happening in that space. Let's talk about, you just mentioned hiring, right? If you want to get hired as a designer, you need to work on it. So what are some tips that you would like to give for people who want to get more opportunities as a designer? Like what can they do to increase their odds of success from the recruiter, right? So how can they get hired more easily? What opportunities can they create? How can they create it?
So from a mindset perspective, right? I always like to start from a mindset. The mindset of, I'm going to be in college, companies are going to come to my campus, they're going to go through this rigorous process where it's just going to process hundreds of people. They have cutoffs, and then they're going to give me a job because I performed well in the interview. That model is not relevant today, right? I don't know a single CEO or design head who's actually recruited on campuses. Why, right? Twitter is my campus now. Discord is my campus. The internet makes it so easy to find really motivated, smart people. So the main suggestion I have is, let's ditch this model of placement. Somebody's going to give something to you, And let's approach it with a skill mindset. Like, can I build the skill of generating demand? As an agency owner, this is something you are very familiar with, right? Like generating demand, which is you have your leads, you convert them to prospects, you have a certain process you follow, after which they become a client, you have to deliver your client, get testimonials, and then you kind of go through that loop again, right? So as a designer, initially it sounds complicated. You're like, wow, what am I going to have to do? But to put it in simple terms, every single piece of work that you put out on the internet is out there doing a job for you. They're helping you get discovered. Over time, as you start posting more of these, it increases the width, the surface area of discovery for you. So that's kind of the start. I think most people in the real world, we have identities, bodies, whatever. Most people are ghosts on the internet. They just have no presence, no work, nothing. And maybe it's just a habit thing. They've just not reached there yet. But it's totally doable, is what I'll just share with everyone. So you want to have this, you don't want to be a ghost on the internet. You want to have this surface area of discoverability. And as you build your confidence, of course, you're going to start posting a lot more. But this is this long-term approach to getting clients, which is as you post work, you're going to get inbound. You're going to get DMs from people saying, hey, that was good. Are you available for a short project, right? Early on, take any project you can, right? Even if it's just 1,000 rupees, couple $1,000, that's okay. But what you want to get smart about is, okay, now every single week, I have a couple thousand people coming across my work. From these couple thousand people, can I get at least 10 of them to actually be interested in what I offer? Now, by chance, you could get DMs, but can I not leave it up to chance, right? Can I create some kind of process where it's a discovery call, or can I use my design skills to actually make a nice website that talks about what you can get, right? And this increases my leads every week, new people reaching out. And so set this up for yourself. This is a system that nobody can take away from you once you have it, right? The analogy I'll give you is placements is kind of like giving somebody a fish, right? Give someone a fish, feed them for a day. Teach someone to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. When you think in terms of this system that you're setting up, you're setting out your work, you're kind of learning how to fish. Because now you don't need to be reliant on placements or anybody to give you a job. You are generating your own demand. And that's a very powerful position to be in, because at that point, you can start saying no to bad clients. At this point, you have an incentive to improve. Like a lot of people get stuck into a motivation trap. But then if you have real clients, you're like, there's no motivation here. I just have to do it. And that's going to push you through.
Right. Great example. So you just mentioned about, just getting started, even if you get like 1,000, 2,000 rupees. That's a very confusing part for most beginners in design. Like, how do they charge? What would be your framework, if you can give any, to decide how much to charge for your, work that you do? Maybe it is for a logo that you create. Maybe it is for a, website design that you've just done, or anything else. How can they decide how much to charge for, and how much to negotiate, how much to not negotiate? How should they think about it? Should they think of it in the hourly rate, or should they have like a per project base rate? What is your thoughts?
I think in India, we're kind of in a very MRP type of mindset. Like, what's the actual price of this, right? And that's because we have MRPs, minimum retail price. But understanding with design, you're not really offering a commodity. कि bro, आलू के price यहाँ पे ऐसे हैं, आप 2x कैसे बेच रहे हो, right? That's not design. Design is a service that you offer. It's not a commodity that you can just get anywhere. And so when it comes to services, it's all about the experience. And you pay more for a better experience. So simple example of this would be, yes, you can get a haircut for $50, but you could also get a really good haircut for $2,000. And the difference, in the end, it's a haircut. But I am still likely to go for this because theek hai, coffee pilayenge, I'm going to sit down for some time, I'm going to chill, I'm going to think about my stuff. And at the end of it, I'm going to go out and I'm going to feel better about it. That's experience. So when you start thinking of design from that perspective, technically there is no right price for a website. It could be 0 rupees. It could be 10 lakhs. I personally know designers who, for for anything that they do, whether it's a website, app, brand, they charge way more than you would normally assume, like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. And the reason for that, of course, you can't do this from day one. The reason for that is they've built that leads thing where they now have more demand than they can actually supply. So they only pick the ones that pay the most or are the most interesting. But starting out as a designer, you need to be leveling up your prices. So you might start off small, but any project, the goal of any project is to help you get a slightly bigger project. The goal of any project is to prove to the future client that yes, I can do this. And if I can do this, I can probably do this. And if I can do this, I can probably do this. And so what you're kind of doing is you're leveraging your way up with every project. And so wherever you start at, 2x your price, 3x your price with your next thing. It feels difficult to do. Mostly if you don't have enough leads, you're like, bro, if one person has reached out to me and if I do it wrong, I get 0 now. Versus if you have that confidence, 10 people reach out to me every month. Even if I make a few mistakes, I still have that abundance, right? So that's the position you want. You want to get to that abundance of so many people want to work with me because I have this work, I've put it out, I have proof, I have testimonials, I have this work that's doing the work for me. And not really be in the scarcity thing where, bro, fuck, I need to take everything that I get because ye nahi liya to kya hoga, right? You want to break out of that as early as possible.
Right. So let's talk about some resources that people can use, right, to get started with design. And when I talk about design, I'm talking about more than just the tools. Like most people just focus on all the tutorials of Photoshop or Figma or any other tool. And what they end up missing out on is the design thinking process, that mindset. So what resources, books, courses, podcasts, or articles you can recommend that would help them develop that? Because I think that's what is missing in most people.
True. So I would definitely say for everybody who's starting out fresh, your main focus is definitely tools. But to go specific, since we're talking product, UX, UI, Figma is your main tool. Like you could spend the next 100 hours in Figma just mastering it, and that will set you up for success, right? So tool is important. But then this is also where people tend to get stuck, right? So going beyond this, to actually get into UX and product, the mindset has to change from, okay, I'm working in this tool as a designer, or, oh, clients are telling me do design work, I am doing design work. It needs to kind of change to user understanding. Who are we designing this for? Why exactly have we done it this way? Designing something for cred versus designing something for PhonePe. There is a clear difference, right? As users, we know it, but can you understand it from the creator perspective? So that is user understanding, business understanding. In the end, I think a lot of people have a misconception around design, which is, isn't that design the final thing you do? Like, isn't it the coat of paint at the end, or isn't it how it looks? Like, what about all this rest? Isn't it done by engineers? But what happens a lot of times, especially in today's age, the state of product teams, is you have engineers, you have product managers, you have designers, and there is a collaborative process. So that's the understanding that people need to have. But beyond that, I would say the focus needs to be on, how do I apply this tool that I've learned in unique areas? And at the same time, user understanding, business understanding, product understanding, these are 3 things to really focus on. The resources around this, it goes outside the traditional design resources, because this now gets slightly into psychology, because you're trying to understand not general psychology of how people behave, but online behavior, right? We don't really behave the same in real life versus online. So online psychology is a big thing, online behavior. Understanding business, so very specifically online digital businesses, how do they work? What are things like leads, funnels, optimizing metrics? That's a good thing to have. And outside of that, just general understanding of products. The products we use today, some of them are marketplaces, like Flipkart. Some of them are more B2B and dashboards, which is if you are a creator, you're deep into your YouTube analytics or something. A lot of them are just consumer, right? It's you're buying something, roti, kapda, makan, whatever. So understanding the businesses, how do these businesses operate? What's their model? how are their margins so high to be able to actually create these beautiful products at scale? That requires you to go deep into startup culture, startup blogs. So that's what I would suggest. That's the kind of path layout.
So Abhinav, at the start of our conversation, you talked about something called spatial design, right? And I want to know more about that. How is that a new opportunity for designers, and how can they take advantage of it with Apple Vision Pro launched? How can they take hold of this new opportunity?
I would say as people spend more time in tech, you start to see these patterns, these kind of waves that happen. I'm sure people kind of notice this with content creation, NFTs, AI. It kind of takes over. There are these paradigm shifts that occur. And eventually one of these kind of makes it to the mainstream, changing the course of history, right? So we had that with the personal computer. We had that with the internet. We had that with smartphones. Today, smartphones are the prominent device. Like, we all have it. We all use this for everything. But the interesting thing that's happening now is we're in the middle of multiple paradigm shifts, right? So of course, there's a whole AI wave happening, but the hardware shift that's happening is we also have the Vision Pro coming out next year. Now, of course, expensive device, probably not going to pick up so much in India with the first generation, but you know how things go. Eventually, there's going to be an Android equivalent of it, like a cheaper version. A lot of companies will look at Apple as the leader and follow behind that. So you're going to see MI and, Xiaomi, whatever, headsets and everything. So the opportunity here as a designer is, as a new platform emerges. Interestingly, Apple did not really call this a VR headset because I guess they did not want to be associated with that baggage. VR has been around for about a decade or way more, right? With Oculus, let's say. With the Vision Pro coming out, we kind of are taking a bet, right? This is a bet that you can take as a designer. That within the next couple of years, in the same way that today you have designers who work on dashboards and websites, you have designers that work on apps, there will be a good number of designers working on spatial experiences for the Vision Pro, for these future headsets. And the reason I'm calling it spatial is this is a term Apple has used. They don't want this to just be a novelty device, like, oh, ghar pe friends aaye hain, chalo dikhate hain VR kya hota hai. They want it to be an everyday device. You want to use this for everything. And the fact that it has an M2 chip, it's a computer on your face. So with that kind of background, there is going to be spatial experiences. So right now, if I have to do, like, let's say AR, augmented reality for something, I have to look through the window. I have to look through the window of my phone. With spatial experiences, you're kind of putting yourself in the shoes of interior designer or architect, where you're thinking about, here's my head, here's the device, and here's the space in front of me. Now, how do I design applications for this? What will be the new applications for this? What will people use it for? With Apple's keynote, they've of course shared a lot of this stuff. There's a new OS as well, Vision OS, which is kind of like iOS, but of course, hanging in space. And so that's a big opportunity. We don't exactly know how it's going to play out, but I'm so excited about it because my career literally started with iOS. The App Store coming out is what enabled me to really kind of grow. And I think for a lot of designers, spatial design, Vision Pro might just do the same thing.
One very important thing that people always look out for is inspiration. And another very important thing for any designer is to actually have a great portfolio. So just talking about this, how can designers find inspiration? According to you, what's your methodology for that? And above that, like for example, Austin Kleon has this book, right? Show Your Work. So how can they show their proof of work? What is the best way to do that according to you?
The funny thing I want to say here is a lot of beginners have this really messed up mindset, which is they get jealous when they see good work. Like behind scroll kar rahe hain, you come across a project, dekha, and you're like, fuck, like I should have done this. Like, isne kaise kar diya, right? And what that happens is over time you start avoiding good work because it makes you feel bad. And then you only look at bad stuff. And then what that eventually leads to is you avoiding good work. So how do you get inspired by it, right? So I would say that's a big unlock before you even start looking at inspiration. Just how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel jealous? No, it should make you feel inspired because you can be at that same position. So when it comes to inspiration, I would definitely suggest one side of it is things like Behance, right? Behance, Dribble, these are some standard platforms for designers, have existed for I think close to a decade or more now. This is a good place to see what designers are up to. And this, you will typically find it a lot more stimulating because designers are creating this as a show and tell for other designers and for clients. So this can really help you be like, wow, like this is the level to which people are executing, right? So online inspiration, Dribble, Behance, those are really good sites to kind of start with. But then there is also this other thing of real world inspiration, which is like, for example, Brian Chesky, the founder of Airbnb, he is a designer turned founder. The culture at Airbnb is a very design-led culture. In fact, at a recent talk at Figma Config, he said we're shutting down the product manager role, and all the designers went like, woo. But then he was like, no, we're not shutting it down. It's just, for us, product management is more product marketing role. But anyways, that kind of culture, that kind of resources that Airbnb is putting out, Airbnb has tons of blogs about their design process. You can go discover designers' work at Airbnb. In fact, you could also just use the Airbnb app, just look at it with a more creator focus rather than consumer focus. Like, how do they do this? What's the animation? What's the transition? What's the overall structure? So this type of inspiration is much harder to get because you have to really, really pay attention. All of us are used to using all of these platforms as users, so we don't really pay attention, right? We just want to get our Goa villa booked so that we can just go on vacation. Right. But as a designer, you're like sitting down and you're looking at the button and you're being like, oh, okay, what's the state here? What happens when I do this? So this type of inspiration, which is real world inspiration, you have to really immerse yourself, like use new products that come out, be kind of aware of what the top companies in design are doing, dive a lot into their official resources. Any company that you look up to today, any product company, any tech company, be it Airbnb, Facebook, Spotify, all of them have an elite design team and they put out a ton of stuff. It's much harder to discover. So that would be my suggestion.
Great. Awesome, Abhinav. Thank you so much for coming here, taking all the time to share your lessons. And I hope the audience got to learn something from this. Thanks a lot, Abhinav.
Thanks, Ishan.
Awesome. Guys, I hope you like this video. You can share it on social and tag us both. I am at Ishan Sharma 7390 and Abhinav is at Abnux. And that is all from me today. I will see you all in the next video. I hope that you liked it. You can let me know in the comment section if you have any questions. And that's all. I will see you again.